Hey, what is going on, people? Welcome back to another edition of Identity Talk for Educators Live. This is your host, Kwame Sarfo-Mensah, live from Addis Ababa. And I got here a very special guest, a little celebrity, man. Got Dr. Shaun Woodly in the house, founder of the Teach, Hustle, Inspire movement that is blowing up. Social media waves everywhere. Everywhere I go, someone's got a shirt on, someone's got a tote bag. So we're going to talk a lot about Teach, Hustle, Inspire, as well as some of the other ventures and initiatives that he's getting into for 2020. And also his book, which I have a copy of, MC Means Move the Class, an incredible read for those who are all about hip hop, as well as trying to spark engagement and motivation in culturally diverse classrooms. This is an incredible read, and you got to get you a copy if you don't have it already.
Appreciate that.
Went through that book in maybe a week. Probably could have been in a day because it was just that good, but life gets in the way. But I got it in within a week, and I feel like I got to read it again 2020 just to refresh my memory.
I hear you.
Yeah, but welcome to the show, Dr. Woodly, man. What's going on?
Thank you so much for having me. I've been looking forward to this conversation ever since the first time that I met you. I want to say it was going on a year and a half ago now in Jacksonville.
Yes.
And I said this guy's got good energy, and we have a similar mindset with what we're trying to do with education. So I am humbled, and I appreciate you sharing your space with me today.
Man, likewise, man. It's it's an honor to have you on the show and to have this conversation, because I know you got a lot going on. So to take the time to chat with me about everything education and hip hop, that's greatly appreciated.
No problem. Glad to be here.
Yes. And just to let you know, during the first 3 episodes, I've had different people already quote you saying, you know what, Dr. Shaun Woodly, I like to touch on Inspire. He's got some swag to it. So, the word is definitely spreading.
I'm trying to get it out there because, and we'll get into this, man, but we're all we have as far as educators.
Yes.
And the more love and light that we can feel and spread amongst one another, the better.
Yes, sir. So let's get into it. So before we get into all of the other incredible things you're doing, why don't you spend some time talking about yourself and what brought you into education? Because I know you're based in Atlanta, but man, you're a New Yorker.
Absolutely.
Born and raised. So just talk a little bit about that.
Sure. Where do I begin? I began my career as an educator with music specifically. In high school, I wanted to be a drummer, and I was in the band, and I played a couple gigs here and there, played at the church, me and my dad. And so I wanted to go on tour and be a drummer. Oh. And that's all I saw. I had tunnel vision, but I got some really solid advice maybe my junior year from one of my music teachers. And he said, make yourself a little bit more marketable, have a backup plan, and study music, but study education as well. Best advice that I got as far as college. And I'm so glad that he gave that to me. And I went to Hampton University, and it was a great experience for me. I did a 5-year program. So I got my bachelor's degree in 4 years, and then did an extra year for my master's, and knocked it all out in 5 years. It was tough because with that 5-year program, as a lot of my peers got into their junior and senior year in college, they were like taking maybe 12, 13 credits. I had 18 credits the entire time I was there.
Oh, wow.
So, in order to get that master's in 5 years, but I was there for it. And I was enjoying what I was learning too. So it was cool. It wasn't a big deal. And I made time, I still made time to be around and kick it a little bit. I was managing my time pretty decently. But once I finished that, I started my teaching in about 2006. Mm-hmm. And I taught in an urban school district in Virginia, and I taught there for about 8 years before moving here to Atlanta, and taught here in another urban district for another 2 years before I started teaching at the college level. And now I teach at the college level, and I teach teachers essentially with classroom management and student engagement. And also I work with schools and school districts with a lot of staff development focused on culturally responsive teaching and culturally responsive classroom management. And I do, just giving keynotes and working with educators one-on-one, small groups, or even at the school level. And it's fun for me because I enjoy this so much. And because this allows me to exercise a lot of my personal creativity with something that I love, I just get ideas left and right. And it's hard work, but like I enjoy the work. Do you know what I mean? So it's just something that I feel like I'm just really starting to get going in, even though I've been doing this for a while. But I really just feel like I'm starting to really hit my stride and hit this groove. And I know that, the top is yet to be seen.
And that's the part that's scary in a good way, because already you're making such an immense impact on so many educators, whether it's through your workshops or through the book or through the clothing line. Like, I'm already seeing the impact. So for you to say that you're just scratching the surface, I'm already excited about what 2020 has in store for all of us. But we'll get more into that as we get deeper into the conversation. So you mentioned, your creativity, how you're able to exercise it through these different ventures. And it allows me to kind of see kind of where you're going with it, especially with Teach, Hustle, Inspire, which is a huge movement that's just blown up. Can you just tell me what inspired you to start this movement? Because I know prior to that, it was under a different name, but you recently went through a rebranding process to get it to become Teach, Hustle, Inspire. So if you can talk to us about that process and what prompted it to happen.
I knew that I wanted to do something to galvanize us as educators. When I originally started everything, as far as just outside of my research and classroom management, just as a way to connect us, I started with a podcast. And the podcast was originally called the Urban and Educating Podcast. And so what I did, that was my platform, if you will, to help reach and connect educators with just a way. I kind of had a tagline. It was like classroom management and student engagement for educators who wanted to change the world but have fun while doing it. And so I used it as just a way to exercise a little more of my creativity with music and good conversation, and just as a way for me to kind of just insert myself into the conversation a little bit more than what I could do with workshops and research, if that makes any sense. And so the podcast was doing pretty well, and I just felt a shift happening. I can't really pinpoint it to a particular moment, but it was just like this vibe that I was getting. And Teach, Hustle, Inspire kind of was just started. I work out of my office here, and it's going to sound crazy, but it just came to me one day with everything that I've been doing as far as my research and this practice in education now going on 13, 14 years. And those three words, everything just boiled down to that, because like, I didn't just pick those three terms just like out of thin air. They each have significant meaning. Because when you talk about the teach, we're talking about how we unlock intellectual treasure. That's for our students, and that's for ourselves, to be 100. When we talk about the hustle sometimes, depending on how it's used, it can mean different things. When I'm talking about the hustle, I'm talking about that grind and how we as educators, we can't stop, we won't stop learning. That is how we evolve as human beings. It's how we evolve as educators. It's how we evolve in our connections with our students. It's how we evolve in our practice. We can't stop and we won't stop learning. We cannot do it. And the Inspire is about how we spread love and light. Like I mentioned before, we're all we have in this thankless work that we do as educators. And I think with those three terms, it was, the connection was just boom, like that's it. And I kind of just threw it out there, like it resonated to me immediately, but I threw it out there and boom, it was just like, yo, this is nice. This is, and then so I went with the momentum, if you will, and kind of just jumped on that and kept moving forward with it. And so I began to get into the merchandising a little bit more, rebranding, the workshops and the podcasts and so forth. And it's been doing really, really well. And I think it boils down to identity. And you're familiar with that because it connects with a lot of educators' identity. We all teach, we all hustle, and we all inspire. That's why we're in this field. Moreover, what I've really began to notice that it resonated with people outside of education. If I have a shirt on or something, like I travel a lot, and so I'll usually wear a t-shirt or a hoodie to the airport, and I have yet to wear it and someone doesn't stop me and say, that's a nice shirt. Where'd you get that from? Or something like that, you know? So, and these are people, education or not. So that's why I'm like, this is really resonating with people who have, you know, just who want to see education flourish, if you will. You know what I mean?
No, absolutely. And it transcends education. I mean, this is a movement that speaks to the greater community.
Absolutely.
You know, and that's what's been amazing about it, because whenever I wear my Teachers Inspired shirts, I always have at least one person stop me and say, hey, where did you buy this shirt? And I have to go into the spiel about how, this is my man, Dr. Shaun Woodly. He's in Atlanta, but he's a New Yorker. He's got this line. Check him out. So I'm constantly doing that whenever I wear these shirts.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, man, because I just want to let you know it's spreading. It really is. But I just find it brilliant. And this is really what was intriguing about you, personally, how you were able to take hip hop culture, me being a hip hop head, I was like, oh, smack, he is intersecting hip hop culture with the art of teaching. And of course, I see the parallels, and I see some of the intersectionality between the two, but to be able to put it in the form of a book, that's just brilliant. So I just have to know,
thank you, man.
What was that? Yeah, I mean, MC means move the class, how to spark engagement and motivation in urban and culturally diverse classrooms. Once again, brilliant book. How did you fully develop this concept of using hip hop culture as a metaphor to describe how teaching is very much an art form?
It was birthed over probably the 10-year process that I spent teaching, because teaching public school, if you will, because my entire time teaching public school, I also had a side hustle as a DJ.
Yes.
And I go into detail in the book about pretty much how from Monday through Friday, I would teach my students. And then come Friday, Saturday, and even some Sundays, I have my turntables in the truck. And a lot of times after work on Fridays, I would go from the classroom to the club. And it was exciting. And just being a DJ, here I am with my turntables and my microphone, and I'm trying to get these participants to move, essentially, and enjoy themselves and have a good time. I'm in control of that. And what happened, Kwame, is that over the course of that 10 years, I started to just notice my objective in my role as an educator and my objective in my role as a DJ was very, very similar. As a matter of fact, I can go so far as to say it was pretty much the same.
Yes.
Because in each of those, I'm in a one-to-many environment. I am a source of motivation. I am a catalyst. I'm a curator of content. You see what I'm saying? I'm making real-time decisions. I tell participants in my workshop and when I work with teachers, if you think about the decision-making process and how often we as educators have to make decisions, it's exhausting sometimes, the energy that we use to make decisions. And it's kind of that same thing that I would discover as a DJ, because I'm constantly making decisions about what song I'm going to play next. And sometimes those decisions have to change. I might come in there with a certain plan based on the crowd, but when I see that they're reacting a certain way, all right, let me go a little bit further this way. All right, let me bring them back.
Yes.
Let me go now this way. And you're constantly making decisions to keep everything here. You don't want it to get too low. Sometimes you want to bring it down, but you got to bring it back down a little bit, so it's just in that, whether the classroom or the club, my objective and how I was trying to get people to do certain things was very similar. So it just almost seemed obvious to me to use that as a frame for what I was trying to do in this book, because I had this idea for the book maybe for at least 3 or 4 years before I actually wrote it. But when I just got that spark to use that as a frame and as an analogy, that left me no choice but to write it.
Like I said, I read this book, and you dropped many gems just throughout. But there was one particular quote that I want to read and just kind of talk with you about. So I'm just going to open up. So I'm on page 52. So this is the side A interlude chapter. And you have a quote that says, "The MC is structured in their approach, but ad-libs and freely flows with a purpose in mind." So profound. When I thought about this, I thought about the MC as far as ad-libbing. So when you think about MCs, you have MCs, they freestyle. They don't always write down their rhymes. Some have, ghostwriters. So in our case, we have people that probably do our lessons for us or help us with our lesson plans. And then you have some who they just have that ability, that innate ability to just present content in a way that's fresh and lively and engaging to students. And that's something that kids don't always teach. It just comes to you. And some people either have it or they don't. And that's how I look at, certain MCs. They come in and they have a certain energy about them that allows them to move the crowd, that allows them to engage, that allows them to entertain.
Yes, that's an entertainment factor, absolutely.
We do the same thing with our students. We can detect when the students are not at their best and when they're not in the best mood emotionally or physically. We sense these things, and based on that, we allow those emotions to inform the way in which we impart knowledge, the way in which we deliver instruction, et cetera, et cetera. So just kind of tell us about where you were going with that. So MC being structured in their approach, ad-libbing and just doing things freely, because that's a lot of what teaching is. Sometimes we have that lesson plan that doesn't work the way it's supposed to.
Absolutely.
You have to have that plan B. That's where the ad-libbing comes in. Because you're making that audible right then and there. So, but just talk to us about that.
It really starts from not being confined to that lesson. Like the lesson is a foundation. And when you teach and you bring life to that lesson, now you're adding the structure on top of it and putting the window dressings and the paint. You see what I'm saying? So in other words, or if you think in musical terms, like that lesson might be the beat, but now you need some horns, you need some melody on top of that to bring life to that. So, you have the confines here. And let's just say, think of it as a road, but you have within the confines of this road, you have a lot of range. Sometimes you might need to go left, sometimes you need to go right, but you still need to stay on that road. Sometimes what can happen is when we as educators with that lesson, we go straight and refuse to change lanes. The role, what I was trying to communicate there with that MC is we have to understand that in the confines of what we're trying to teach, you can change lanes sometimes. And sometimes if you need to get off an exit to get on a side street for a couple of minutes because it's relevant to what you're trying to do, and ad-lib and bring something else to make that connection, that is perfectly fine. But at the end of the day, you want to get yourself back into the confines of that road weave as you need to, ad lib as you need to. And that comes with a certain level of comfort, which comes with a certain level of experience and knowledge with doing these things. You know, I certainly don't recommend, I wasn't saying that to imply fly off the cuff.
No,
You know what I mean? But that is just more so a license for creativity while teaching.
which I totally agree with. But then you have some people, if we're going to play devil's advocate, you have some people who say, I want to be innovative. I want to be creative. But my creativity is stifled by the fact that I have these mandates from my district saying, you know what? I got to get ready for these benchmark assessments. I got to get ready for these standardized tests. You know, I have to show that my kids are growing by 20, 25% by the end of this year, or else I may not have a job next year and I got to feed my family. So there are people who want to do these things, but there is a sense of apprehension.
Absolutely.
Because this is their livelihood. This is what allows them to support their families financially and among other things. So, I mean, I could see the dilemma because I've been in that situation before, but then you kind of get to a point where it's like, I got to do what's best for my students because ultimately that's why we come into the classroom every day. That's why we should be doing this work. It's because of the students and to a greater degree, their families, because they need our support as well. But what I find interesting is, and this is why I think teaching is so beautiful, because just like with MCing, you have different types of MCs. You have your more gangster rappers, man. You got your more conscious rappers. You know, you have those that are more eclectic and alternative in the way they go about their musicality, and teaching the same way. You know, you have some who are more strict and authoritative. You have some who are a bit more lax. Like for myself, I'm more of a joker. I like to joke around with kids. So I'm like the big kid. But then my partner might not be like that. But at the same time, we get the respect from both classes because we're on the same page in terms of expectations and norms, even though stylistically we do things differently. The expectations and the norms are constant, and the kids recognize that. And you mentioned that in the book as well. Going into this whole hip-hop education revolution, because there's a revolution going on, which is crazy because there was a point in time when hip-hop was frowned upon by government officials. So, I mean, for those who are hip-hop historians, you probably know about some of the issues that, let's say, 2 Live Crew and Uncle Luke had to deal with back in the day, even with Ice-T, when he put out Pop Killer. And then ironically,
talk about the West Coast.
But
there
was a lot of controversy, you know, with hip-hop, particularly in the late 80s and early 90s. And then now you fast forward to 30 plus years later, you have things like Hip Hop Ed with Dr. Emden, who's just a phenomenal educator. And you have, Jeff Dess, Trill, Trill, No Trill. Like, you have all these different movements going on.
Right.
And then you have programs like Vocabulary.
Yeah.
An education program that actually uses hip hop as the vehicle to drive instruction. Who would have thought this moment would come? So I want to know your thoughts about the current state of hip hop culture within this context of education. What are your thoughts about this movement and how it's evolved over time?
I think it's awesome because it's allowing educators to exercise flexibility, allowing educators to exercise creativity. And a lot of this boils down to that. That's what hip hop is. It's creative expression. It is a form of connectivity culturally for us, and bringing that into the classroom helps as a method, a tactic, if you will, to bring connectivity between content and student. What people have to be careful of, though, and sometimes it can be intimidating, is that it's all fine and good for someone who grew up on that, for someone who has experience with hip hop, and so something like vocabulary is a minor adjustment, but it can be intimidating to someone who that is not a part of their cultural experience and who doesn't have that predetermined, who doesn't have any sort of a connection prior to that with hip hop or any sort of hip hop vehicle. And it can be a little intimidating, rightfully so.
Yeah.
Which is perfectly fine and understandable. What we have to understand is that it's just one way, and it's a tactic. At the end of the day, it really, really is. It's one vehicle out of many. Hip hop and education is relevance, but it's not responsiveness, if that makes any sense. And you as a practitioner of the field, you know what I'm talking about here, because it brings that immediacy. It's something that is pop culture. We see, hear, feel, vibe with every day, but that responsiveness goes below that. And that's what, regardless of your, as an educator, your cultural upbringing or background, that is where you can leverage something like that, regardless of if you're familiar with, Jay-Z, Biggie, or anything else hip hop wise. You see what I'm saying? And I think that sometimes is where we start to have a little bit of murkiness in the conversation. Sometimes educators feel like, well, I don't know the Migos. I don't listen to the Migos, so I can't bring hip hop into my classroom, or I can't teach in a culturally responsive way. You can teach culturally responsive lessons to your students when you go below the surface. Hip hop is surface level. Culturally responsive teaching is below the surface.
Right. And you talk about this idea of surface culture, which is basically what we're able to see.
Correct.
Those traits of culture that we can see, but we don't deal with the internal aspect of culture, which isn't always easy to detect.
Correct.
But just speaking on culturally responsive teaching, I always like to tell people, well, it's not really a new concept in education. I mean, it's a buzzword, but it's been going on for many generations.
Facts.
Because at the end of the day, being culturally responsive is, in my opinion, the greatest form of empathy. Because at the end of the day, you have to consider the cultural background of your students. You have to consider their interests and their hobbies. I mean, we're both fathers. We know what our children like. We don't just go ahead and just buy whatever. We take the time to think about what type of toys or gifts that they like based on their interests. That's us taking the time to get to know our kids. It's the same concept with our students. We can't just go ahead and decide on, okay, we're just gonna go ahead and just do stuff on worksheets. We're just gonna do work on worksheets all day, or we're gonna just do that. We have to think about, just pedagogically, what works for our students, because not everybody learns the same. That's cultural responsiveness. So when you talk about culture, a lot of people like to interchange it with race.
Correct.
As opposed to looking at it as, well, race is just under the umbrella of culture. And I think that's one of the issues in certain districts. Whenever this idea of CRT is rolled out, they automatically think it's all about race. When in actuality, it's not only about race. We're talking about sexual orientation. We're talking about identity. We're talking about gender. We're talking about religion. We're talking about food. All these different elements fall into that, but we hone in on the race.
Yeah.
And I know, and I can understand why, because it's a very integral component, but it's not everything. And I think that's what causes people to shy away from being more culturally responsive in their own practices, just from what I've researched and what I've observed just in my years in the classroom. And we got
at the end of the day, it's uncomfortable. I'm not going to sit here and lie and say, that it isn't, when it really is. Talking about race in a professional atmosphere is uncomfortable.
Hard.
But absolutely. But when we start as educators to embrace that culture is vital to the success of our students beyond race, then we start to understand. And when we start to understand the impact of culture, when we start to understand what elements that we can incorporate into how we're teaching, not necessarily what, but how we're teaching them. When we inject curiosity, when we inject collaboration, when we inject ways for our students to make meaning of the content according to how they make sense of the world, you could teach anything. You could teach anything. Math, science, English, social studies, PE, music, you could teach anything when you have an understanding of those elements and you inject those into those lessons. Now we begin to shift the narrative a little bit, because what happens is when we're taught to be educators, we're not taught to teach with those things in mind. Mm-hmm. Technically speaking, right now, the way many of us have been taught to be educators, it is culturally responsive, but the question below the question is whose culture? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yes.
So it's now we have to understand how we can connect to people of color who more than likely come from backgrounds, from collectivist backgrounds, people where we as a people, we collaborate. That is a part of our DNA.
Yes.
To be around, to connect with one another.
Yes.
And when we start to really inject narratives, teaching with story, and those types of vehicles, it's how a lot of our students of color make sense of the world, and it's how we can get them to really move the academic needle when it comes to content.
No, absolutely. And the work continues even in 2020. We're still doing
Absolutely.
it. Still a lot to be done. But man, let's have a little bit of fun, man. We've been talking, about important issues, but you know what? I can't have you on the show without engaging in some hip hop dialogue. So indulge me if you will. I grew up a hip hop head, grew up in Connecticut with my brother. So obviously Connecticut is not a state where you have like a specific hip hop culture.
Mm-hmm.
We kind of gravitated towards all types of hip hop. So we grew up listening to hip hop from New York, hip hop
Tri-state, absolutely.
Hip hop from Jersey, hip hop from the West Coast, so Midwest. So we had an eclectic ear when it came to hip hop. Mm-hmm. So my question is, let's assume that you had to go on a stranded island.
Okay.
You only take 3 albums with you. Which albums would they be?
Okay. They're going to be 3 albums that are going to reflect very different times of my life. Mm-hmm. One is going to be Noriega's album.
N.R.E.
N.R.E. Yep. I want to say that was 98, 97, 98.
Yeah.
Another where I start to get really indecisive is that middle time, because that was around high school for me. Okay. And then there was some transition around college where I really kind of got to, because when I went from New York to Virginia, mm-hmm. and then started to become exposed to different types of hip hop. Growing up in New York, it was all about Biggie and Jay-Z, period. If it was outside of that, I didn't care about it. But even at that time in my life, I would have to say, and it's kind of a blend of hip hop, and it was kind of around that same time that I didn't appreciate it until later. It's hip hop and R&B with Lauryn Hill's The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill. Yep. And then to reflect the later period of my life, Jay-Z's 444, because that album, with everything that it represented as far as just maturity, as far as growth, speaks to a lot of my growth as an academic and as a practitioner. So it would probably be those three.
All right. Yeah, it's tough for me because, you know, I had an older brother and he pretty much put me on to everything, all the hip hop. Growing up, we were listening to a lot of different hip hop, but we were specifically fans of the Native Tongues movement. We listened to like De La Soul. We listened to, you know, a lot of these different movements at the time. One album that really represents just that time for me, and is one of my all-time favorite albums, is A Tribe Called Quest, Midnight Marauders.
Still thumps to this day.
Either between that or Low End Theory. I always struggle to choose which one, but it's definitely going to be one of those albums, either Low End Theory or Midnight Marauders, but I'll probably lean towards Midnight Marauders. That's an album that you can listen from start to finish. Even to this day. I listen to it now, it's like, it's timeless. It feels like 2020.
That's what each of those three were. They're timeless. That's a good word for that. Timeless.
Timeless.
Yeah.
That's one album. And then going into, I guess, high school. What albums was I listening to at the time? It's tough because there's so many great albums.
It is.
So many. You know what I'm gonna go with? I'm gonna go with Wu-Tang Clan, Enter the 36 Chambers. And the reason why is because, you know, at the time I was in elementary school. Matter of fact, it came out on the same day as Midnight Marauders. They were released on the same day in '93, November '93.
Wow.
Yeah, those two albums. The reason why I say Wu-Tang Clan's Enter the 36 Chambers is because my brother would always quiz me on the 9 members. So he'd play a song and he'd tell me, who's that right now?
Yeah.
I could always get Method Man.
Oh, yeah, of course.
I could always get ODB because they had the most distinctive voices. Like, you know it's them.
Yeah.
But I always mix up Jizza and RZA.
Of course.
I then mix up Ghost and Raekwon. Like, I always jack them up. But when it came to Method Man and Old Dirty Bastard, I already knew who they were because their voices were so different from the rest of the group.
Yeah.
Couldn't get them wrong. But, yeah, Wu-Tang Clan, definitely another album I take with me. And then fast forwarding to this current time, now that I'm older, my ear is a lot more mature. Like, I don't really get into the trap music and just like the new age hip hop. I respect it, but I just can't get fully into it. If I had to choose one rapper during this era, an album that I really liked, I'm gonna go with J. Cole KOD's album.
Okay.
J. Cole KOD. And I love J. Cole because he has like the hip hop, that old school hip hop feel. Yeah. But he's contemporary at the same time. So it's like
the message too.
It's like the perfect mix of the two. Like, he respects the OGs, and you could tell he's a student of, you know, of the previous eras, and he tries to bring that, you know, in his artistry. So, you know, definitely J. Cole KOD album.
Awesome.
Great album. So
dope stuff.
That was tough, man.
Yeah, I know. There's so much good content to choose from.
Good content. All right, I got another one. If there's one rapper that you would say best describes your style of teaching, who would that be and why? There's a rapper. You could do two if one's too hard. I'll give you an extra.
Okay. I would probably more so gravitate for the exact reason I gave that third album, Jay-Z, because of his growth. Like, when you listen from the beginning to the end, you know, his entire discography, you can hear the growth with the message, with the style, with how everything is presented, even with what he's doing now as far as his ambitions, being a family man, being in the community. That represents growth, and that is kind of me in the beginning. You know, I wasn't always a good teacher. I struggled in the beginning, and it was something that I had to kind of humble myself and realize that, you know what, this is going to take a lot more work than I was originally putting into it. And once I began to do that, I began to see that growth and began to love it more. And because I began to love it more, I wanted to do more, which is the reason why I went back to school, and which is the reason why I began to write the book and you know, just put so much more into it, and still am doing it to this day and feel like I'm just beginning.
I think for me, and this is just based on what the kids tell me,
Uh-huh.
as you know, I'm somebody that likes to, like, I like to dress up a little bit when I go to work. Like I'm all,
Okay. Okay.
you know, I like to get the bow tie going. Gotta have the right socks with the right loafers. So I'm
Absolutely.
very particular about my appearance, because I feel like if you dress well, you're gonna teach well. That's just my philosophy. I think it's a feng shui type of
Oh
mind.
yeah. Oh no, I'm with you.
And I totally, you know, believe in that. But I would say, you know what? I'm gonna go with Big Daddy Kane. And
Oh.
here's my reasons. Because Big Daddy Kane always looking fly. He didn't need to, you know, dress like everybody else. He didn't need to
Mm-hmm.
have like the, you know, the gangster look and the, you know, the jeans or whatever. He had no problem wearing a suit.
Mm-hmm.
He had no problem wearing the gold chain and the medallions. And he was totally secure with who he was. And
Indeed.
I feel like that really represents who I am, because, you know, like I'm really into, like, you know, being fashionable. And then the kids notice it to the point where if I wear jeans and a shirt, they think something's wrong with me.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Mm-hmm.
also he was
Mm-hmm.
just smooth in his delivery. And I feel like, you know, I have a smoothness to the way I do things. You know, it's somewhat unconventional, but it
Okay.
works with my students. Because I do it in a way that's understandable, but it goes beyond convention, you know, especially when I have
Mm-hmm.
to, you know, articulate, you know, different concepts to them, especially because I'm a math teacher. So obviously always using the traditional terminology isn't going to work, you know, with students. You have
Sure.
to find ways to, you know, make those connections. So this is where the culture comes in, you
That's
know,
it. That's it.
but, but I would say Big Daddy Kane for sure, for sure.
So
Man, as we're winding down, I know 2020 is going to be big for Teach Hustle Inspire. I do know that you have a Twitter chat that's going to be happening regularly.
mm-hmm.
And I believe it's going to be the last Monday of every
That's
month,
correct.
if I'm correct.
Last Monday.
I just
Yep.
came across that today as I was web surfing. But outside of that, what other projects are on the horizon for 2020?
As you mentioned, the Twitter chat is going to start the last Monday in January, and we're going to go with the last Monday. It's probably going to be something that is going to be more frequent, but I'm just going to start with that.
Mm-hmm.
Also, the next season of the podcast is going to be starting with more regular and consistent episodes, and so that is going to be something that I'm working on, and definitely got to get you on there, by the way. So make some room for me in your calendar, please.
Oh,
Definitely got to
no
get you
doubt.
on there.
You let me know when I'm there, brother. You know I got
Okay, I appreciate that.
you.
And then also, there are a couple of other things that I'm working on. I haven't hashed out all of the details yet, but you know, I'll be sharing some of that information via social media with some things that are going to be coming for the spring of 2020. Some big things that are going to really, I think, take Teach Hustle Inspire to the next level with educator health and wellness in mind.
Okay. And I know that's something that you started to touch on briefly, like last year, I know, but now you want to make a bigger movement out of that, because I think that's really important.
Yeah.
Just the idea of self-care, because we're selfless, by nature. We're
Yes.
thinking about the kids. We're thinking about how they're doing when they leave us. We got to think about ourselves too. We got to look out for ourselves, because if we're not well, we can't teach our kids well. We can't be there for them the way we need to.
You said it.
Yes, sir. And
you said it.
So yes. So Dr. Shaun Woodly, man, appreciate you for coming, brother. Always a pleasure to talk with you. And before we sign off, can you just let people know how they can follow you on social media, and also provide the website for Teach Hustle Inspire for people to get their gear, like we got ours. So
absolutely. You can find me. I'm on Twitter at Shaun Woodly. It's spelled ShaunWoodly. There's no E in my name. A lot of times when people write my name, they put an E in it for some reason. But everything else, Instagram, Facebook, and even just searching the hashtag Teach Hustle Inspire, you'll find me. I'll pop right up. And the website is, of course, www.teachhustleinspire.com. And they don't have information as to how, if for speaking engagements, staff development, workshops, keynotes, as well as merchandise, the hoodies, the t-shirts, anything Teach Hustle Inspire, you'll find it right there.
Yes, sir. And thank you again, Shaun, for coming through. And on behalf of Dr. Shaun Woodly, this is Kwame Sarfo-Mensah, and we're wishing you a good morning, good afternoon, good night, wherever you are in the world. And we're going to do this again another time. Peace.
Thank you again for having me, brother. I appreciate you.
Yes, sir.